So good evening. I think I'm live, and if somebody would indicate in the chat whether they can hear me, that way I can continue to go forward. So let me get some of my stuff in order here. Apologize. Okay, so I'm just going to go, and people can join in when they get there. If, like I said, indicate in the chat whether there's problems with the sound. Uh-oh, that didn't sound good. So is the sound still working? Somebody say okay. Okay, no problems. Okay. So there's a ton of things that are happening. So listen, pray that this goes okay. We've had 2 power surges, interruptions today. We do have a full house generator, but they haven't been long enough for the generator to kick on. But when the power goes out, there goes the internet and that type of thing. So if you lose me, the first thing you should assume is that the power went out, or there was a power surge or interruption, and probably not the rapture. So, but no reason for you to freak out. I could just sit here and rap and talk for a long time. So what I'm going to try to do tonight, I'm going to do a little bit on the Israeli elections and what's gone on there. I also have a long clip. And so I'm going to play a long clip of Big Gvir as he spoke to us at the Knesset the other day, or a week ago yesterday in Jerusalem, while they were in the process of forming their government. And then I'm going to just talk about some different subjects. And I have a bunch of notes here. The world is really crazy. I'm going to put up a slide here with a title on it that says World on a Cliff. So what I hope to do in January, by the way, is to bring in some guests. I've already talked to Jim Fletcher, who a lot of you have heard of, about doing a live update. There's also, and I don't remember the guy's name right now, I have his book sitting here someplace on my desk. We're going to talk about dinosaurs because sometimes to understand the past and the future, you have to understand the past. And I think he's done a pretty good work analyzing that issue. Also, just an update on what I'm doing. As you know, here in the Midwest, we're expecting snowmageddon, the usual thing that they do. We're going to get anywhere from 1 to about 400 inches of snow, and the high temperature is going to be anywhere from 5 degrees to like 375 below zero. Who knows what's going to happen. This morning when I got up, they said we're going to get 1 to 3 inches. And now they're saying we're going to get maybe 6 inches. But we're going to have up to 45, 50 mile an hour winds, wind chills in the 45 to 50 degree below zero range. I think the high temperature Saturday is going to be like 1, Sunday is going to be like 10, but with a lot of breeze. So no golf this weekend. So my intention is on Sunday, if we don't cancel church because of weather, we're not canceling church because it's Christmas. I think that's kind of silly. I mean, why don't you cancel church because it's Sunday? I mean, because it's not a work day. But we may cancel church because of the weather. But that's so anybody from FBC, that's Fellowship Bible Chapel, that's listening, that doesn't mean we're canceling. We're just doing it. Also pray for one of our video people. Brian had a rotator cuff surgery yesterday. And if any of you have ever had that, personally, I've had 4 joint replacements, both hips, both knees, and they're difficult. A lot of times it depends on your surgeon and how bad it was before. But I've had 2 shoulder operations in my life. One, I did a total AC separation when I went over the handlebars of my bike when I was about 29. And then I had rotator cuff surgery about 6 years ago. And I can tell you the rotator cuff surgery was the worst surgery I've ever had, because you don't realize how much you use your shoulder and arm, and you're not allowed to move your arm for about 6 weeks. So it's pretty rough recovery. So pray for Brian. Personally, I slept in a chair for 18 weeks because I could not lay down. So if church is canceled on Sunday, back to that, I will do a live update from home at some point. Tuesday morning at 10 Eastern, 9 Central, and you can figure out the rest of the times. I'll be live on Q90 FM, Q90FM.com on Stand for the Truth with David Fiorazzo, and we'll talk about some of the things that happened this past year. We're going to do a little bit of that on Sunday. As you know, sort of doing a highlights of things, looking back or looking forward is almost impossible in this day and age because everything is happening so quickly. So let's look at, I'm going to flip over here to my other screen. And hang on here while I got to do a share screen and get to where I want to go. So let's start with Ukraine. This will get everybody ticked off at me right off the bat. So let's go with, let's see here. And so I'm going to try not to use my slides, because when I use my slides, that seems to break my connections. So look, the war in Ukraine is going on. I think I mentioned Sunday that I had a very long conversation with a Ukrainian pastor in Jerusalem last week. Several hours. I peppered him with a lot of questions to the extent that he probably could eat his dinner. And he had a very different perspective on what's going on in Ukraine and Russia's role and that type of thing. And I have no reason, as we talked about spiritual things, I have no reason to not trust the guy. I thought he was very honest, but what's going on in Ukraine is very bad for the Ukrainian people. Russia is being brutal. Russia is doing to Ukraine what they did to Syria. People are not able to live. It's told by other people, Ukraine, in big cities in Ukraine, people might have 3 hours of power a day. So, put yourself in the Midwest here today without much power and the temperatures that we're having, and figure out how difficult life is. It's very, very difficult. It's just tens of thousands of people on both sides of this war have died. It doesn't seem to be anything to stop it. But here's the one that concerns me. This is from Arab News. This is just one of the places that news sources that I picked up. America to arm Ukraine with Patriot missiles. This is a severe escalation of the war. If people are trying to get us into a hot war with our people on the ground, this is the way to do it. My understanding, talking to military people this week, is that it takes a significant amount of training for American soldiers to operate a Patriot missile battery. It's not the easiest thing to operate in the world. In fact, it can take up to 2 years to train someone. So the concern that I have is if their Patriot missile battery taken, I've heard that they're going to push it to Kiev and install it there. If that happens, it's going to be a major escalation, because it almost certainly indicates that United States troops are on the ground operating. That's not good. Russia has threatened nuclear responses. I think it's one of these situations that we live in where it's war and rumors of war. We are in a period of time that I clearly think that we live in a period of time of the birth pangs. As one person said, and I agree with what he said at a conference, we're in the period of time of it's what this end time thing that eventually results in the return of the Lord and the setting up of his millennial kingdom. It's a birthing process. It's not a C-section. I thought that was a very wise comment. By the way, I don't know if you've seen it. Maybe I'll talk about it on Sunday, but there is a organization out there that called Ecto Labs, I think is what they're called. You can find their videos. I'll play a video on Sunday where they are they're talking about artificial wombs. And when I see people doing this, I get a little bit, my antenna go up. So one of the things that they're saying that they're going to do with these artificial wombs is you won't have any contractions. You won't have any birth pain. You'll have painless birth of children. Now, we know that there's a concerted effort that they don't want to have children. In fact, I've seen studies this week where male sperm rates pretty much across the board have dropped 62%. And that has health effects on males. And it also means that the ability to reproduce and have children is also lessened. So now they want to move it to the lab. But in an environment where we're living in a time of the birth pangs, the one example that Jesus used was the birthing process. As we get closer, the contractions get closer, more intense. The scientific world is trying to undo that process. So do I think it's connected to what Jesus said? Absolutely. I think it's connected to what Jesus said. So that's one thing. So we're in the wars and rumors of war type thing. There was also, I'll probably have them Sunday, my next update at some point. Explosion of a major gas pipeline in Ukraine. I saw on some Telegram channels that I follow today, pipeline explosions, gas explosions in Morocco. Something is going on. It is like there is a concerted effort to shut down the world energy supply. And that has huge implications. I was talking to someone at the Christian Media Summit in Jerusalem last week about what's going on in the UK. He said that their costs have gone up 4 or 5 times for utilities, and that he had talked to his wife, and she was sitting in the house with a couple sweaters, a sweatshirt, a coat, and a parka on in the house because they're trying to save energy, and it's cold. It's going to be extremely cold over a large portion of the United States this week. People in Denver sent me emails saying that their temperatures had dropped 68 degrees from one day to the next. So it's going to be a rough weekend. I mean, we've had these weekends before, but this seems to be a much bigger area that's going to be affected. But so back to Ukraine, there was this gas explosion in Russia of a major pipeline, and the gas supply to Europe is at risk, and that carries with it a cascading effect. I think people are going to get by. They've been able to fill up a lot of their storage that might get them through this winter. But what happens next year, particularly if this war is not over, we're in a difficult position, in my opinion. And I think this, with the escalation by the lunatics in charge in Washington, D.C., this may go further. So that's the Patriot missile thing to Ukraine, I think, is a very big deal. Zelensky was here this week, and he's saying, you're going to give me $45 billion or something in this ridiculous bill that they're putting out, the omnibus spending bill. And it's not just an omnibus spending bill. In fact, for example, one of the things in this bill in D.C. that they're doing is it's going to redo the Electoral Vote Count Act that people in one party relied on to challenge a certain decision-making process that we do every 4 years here in the United States. People relied on that. They relied on that act. Both parties have relied on that act. You can go and find plenty of videos on C-SPAN where the opposing party relied on that. And what did it do? Now those people they've had criminal referrals done on them. There was let's see if I have this. So this report, this is the executive summary report that came out yesterday on J6. This is, in my view, this is just a complete fiasco. This is weaponizing the legal system. And there was supposed to be a 800-some page report come out today, and I've been away from the news somewhat today, so I don't know if it came out yet or not. This report is biased. It doesn't look at all the evidence. If they were unbiased, just release all the videos. People will go through them. When you go to trial, you're probably going to get those videos released if people file proper discovery requests. I don't think we've seen the end of this. This is going to be the narrative. And now I see that the House has released President Trump's tax returns for multiple years. And the only thing I can say to that is I don't really care if presidential candidates release their tax returns or not. And the way this is being done means if they did it to him, they can do it to you. And this invades privacy. They'll never release their returns completely. I think we're in a very, very bad place in this country. Also, by the way, if you have questions, I'm going to try to answer questions if I can. Please put them in all caps. I just think we have a very difficult time. Yeah, somebody asked a question. It says attack on the United States Capitol. That's exactly what they said. The insurrection with no people armed at the insurrection. But this is their report. You can get it. You can download it. You can read it. And then there was supposed to be an 800-page report that comes out today. So let's see here. Let me go back. So this is Ukraine Arab News. I'm sort of sitting here looking through a lot of the things I have, and it's crazy. So I don't know if the New Jerusalem Post has come out yet. I usually get it about this time each evening in my feed. By the way, just so you know, I use a program called Press Display / Press Reader. And what this program does is it gives me access to about 6,000 newspapers and magazines around the world. That's how I get some of the graphics that I do. You see this one here. It looks like the front page of the Jerusalem Post from this morning, today. And so they've Netanyahu went in a little bit before the midnight deadline Wednesday and said, I can form a government. He had to tell President Herzog that. And so now when we were there at the Knesset last week at the media summit, the Knesset members were actually working, the ones that were just recently elected. They're there meeting, but the government hasn't been formed yet. I know it's kind of confusing, but the administrative part of the government had not been formed yet. That appears to be coming about. Now, the election has the proposed legislation. For example, there's people in the opposition party who are controversial. One is the National Religious Zionist Party, headed by Ben Gvir. There are also Orthodox parties, Shas Party, United Torah Judaism, and I think Shas might be the ultra-Orthodox. Some of the people that head up those parties have prior convictions. For example, there's one guy who's got a recent tax conviction. So they're putting through legislation to allow them to run. There's also a very controversial thing that's been as part of the coalition agreement that they reached. There's a controversial bill that they're putting in that will allow people who have been accused of being racist in the past to run for the Knesset. There was a guy who ran a couple guys who ran a couple of years ago, and the Israeli Supreme Court said that you can't run because you're a racist. So that was sort of the controversy about Ben Gvir. So the government, just like a Republican government in this country, is being described as a far right, ultra right wing government. I don't think that that's necessarily characteristic of Netanyahu. The way the Israeli parliament works, you have to put these coalitions together, and sometimes in those coalitions you're going to get people that you don't necessarily agree with, and you have to compromise. That's the nature of politics. But I mean, there are a lot of people in Israel, and there's even people among the Christian press that are related to were at the media summit that I attended last week that are also concerned about what's going. So I'm going to play a clip of, by the way, back to the Ukraine thing for just a moment. In Israel, they have a very different view of the Ukraine-Russia thing than a lot of conservatives in America have. It's a very controversial subject. They're upset, though, because Ukraine never votes with Israel at the UN on some of these, constant stream of resolutions against Israel. So that's concerning. But so what I'm going to do now is I think I'm going to go and I'm going to play a clip of what happened at the Knesset last week. Let me pull this up here. Got to remember which browser I use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the screen. I'm going to go here. I'm going to get a video file and play it. And I hope this plays. So this is the first thing you're going to see in this video clip is you're going to see Sharon Haskell. I believe her name is. She used to be a Likud member. She's big in the LGBT community in Israel. She and her partner just had twins. And I'm just putting this for context. So what you're going to see is you're going to see her talking about some concerns expressed by people in the Christian media there about, we don't feel like we get enough support for our parades and that sort of thing. And she answers that. She's very articulate. She gave a very good speech defending Israel early on, but she, just understand where she's coming from. And then the head of the government press office is going to get up and introduce Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir doesn't speak English that well, so he had an interpreter there. The interpreter was a man named Yishai Fleischer, who is the official spokesperson for the Jewish community of Hebron. In fact, if you look behind me, that's an old black and white picture of Hebron taken from Tel Remedia, the ancient Tel, where David ruled from. And over here, let's see, right there is the tomb of the patriarchs, built by Herod. The top part, which includes a synagogue and a mosque, was added much later. Of course, Islam didn't exist until the 700s. But it's clear this was built by King Herod. The stone structure is identical. Herod built 3 commemorative buildings to put himself in the good graces of the Jewish people. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem, the tomb of the patriarchs in Hebron, and these things all would have existed at the time of Jesus. And then at Mamre, where my friend Brian Schrager and I went after we went to the Tel, where this picture would have been taken from. I put up a little video about it on my Facebook page. We went to the Tomb of the Patriarchs, we went to the Tell, and then we went a couple miles away to Mamre. And today I see that some of the places we drove by, there was a shooting, terror attack. When we were there were soldiers all over. So you're going to see Ben Gvir. So he's being translated by Yishai Fleischer. And I think I mentioned Sunday that I was privileged to go over to the Fleischers for Shabbat dinner before I left to go to the airport Friday evening. A wonderful, just a very wonderful time with these special people. And they support Ben Gvir. They're friends. Ben Gvir lives in Hebron. There's about 1,000 Jews that live there among 300,000 Arabs. So I'm going to try this. And so please, if you can't hear this, let me know. Here is Ben Gvir, first Sharon Haskell, then introduction, and then watch what happens as he gets up to speak.
Understand also the geography. A lot of the churches sits in the west area of Jerusalem. The east area of Jerusalem, which is a place that has been under attack many times. Not just the Christians, but also the Jewish citizens, houses, homes, people who live in the area. And it's becoming more, it was we had a very difficult period of time, a very challenging one during the last few years, especially in particular. Yes, we need to do more in order to defend and protect that area of the city as well. We've achieved in the recent, I would say, months, to calm a lot of the attacks that were happening there, not just on the Christian and not just on the churches. You need to understand the main route that was there was basically citizens, normal citizens who would drive in their private cars, would be sacked with stones and rocks. So it was a very difficult area to protect in general. So we need to do much more. The problems usually comes during the times of the Ramadan, when there's a lot of incitement of young Muslims in the mosques in those areas. The Shabak and the intelligence is doing a lot of work in order to identify them in advance, but it's very, very difficult, and there's a lot of restrictions on the authorities in these areas as well because of international pressure.
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker today is rising star in Israeli politics.
I just apologize, but I have to.
So Ben Gvir is on the left, Yishai Fleischer on the right, and now you're going to see all the other Knesset members. So we can't be in the same room with him when he speaks, so we have to get up and leave. So there goes Sharon Haskell.
I'm sorry. I also have to apologize, first of all, for coming on time, and second of all, for leaving you now. Thank you very much, everyone.
So this is another Knesset member.
Otzma Yehudit, in Hebrew, we translate it as a Jewish slang. He has gained interest and great popularity in Israel, and on a personal note, I know this gentleman since 1994, when I cover his action as a journalist on the hills of Judea and Samaria. One thing I can say for sure, okay, we are all journalists in this room. The camera sure loves him. And you can see it, you will decide on yourself. The international media, since the last election in Israel, beginning of November, actually love to hear what does he have to say in terms of what's going on now in the Middle East conflict with the Palestinians. So, and this is actually the first time that you are actually performing properly in front of the foreign media in Israel. And as I said to you, most of the foreign media that come into Israel want an interview with MK Itamar Ben-Gvir. So it's an honor to ask you to come and to hear what you have to say, please.
So this is Ben Gvir, that's Yishai Fleischer, and
Shalom,
he's a lawyer, so Yishai's going to translate for him.
I'm sorry that my English is not for fast speaking, but I'll be translating for you today.
לעשות כאן.
I came to tell you what we really want to do here today in the Knesset.
ועל מה אני נלחם
What I'm fighting
כאן
for
במדינה שלנו.
in our state.
משום שיש לנו אויב, לכולנו אויב משותף,
We have a joint enemy, all of us,
וזה הג'יהאד.
and it's the jihad.
זה אלה שרוצים להפוך את כל העולם למשטר של חליפות.
It's those who want to turn the whole world into a caliphate.
אלה שחושבים שמי שהוא לא מוסלמי אין לו זכות קיום כאן.
Those who think that if you're not Muslim, you have no right to live here.
אלה שפוצצו את מגדלי התאומים,
Same folks that blew up the Twin Towers.
אלה שנלחמים באנושות.
Those who fight humanity and civilization.
המצב שלנו במדינת ישראל הוא מצב שבו אנחנו לאורך כל השנים מתגוננים מאותם אלה.
The situation of the state of Israel is that we've been in a defensive posture from those people this whole time.
אני אוהב את המדינה שלנו,
I love our state.
אני אוהב את הארץ שלנו.
I love our land.
אני את ניצן, כמו שהוא הזכיר, מכיר כשהייתי נער.
I know Nitzan Haaretz from when I was a young man.
מאז גם שיניתי סגנון,
Nitzan.
משם שיניתי סגנון, משם...
But since then I've changed a little bit.
אבל דבר אחד לא השתנתי.
But one thing I haven't changed about.
באהבה שלי לעם ישראל,
My love to the people of Israel
ולאנושות כולה.
and the whole world, all the world's people.
אני רוצה להיות השר לביטחון פנים במדינת ישראל.
I want to be the minister of national security, formerly minister of internal security,
ולדאוג לכולם.
and to care for everybody in our state,
לדאוג לדתיים וחילונים.
religious and non-religious,
לדאוג ליהודים וערבים.
Jews and Arabs.
לדאוג לכל הילדים שלנו שיוכלו ללכת בטוח ברחוב.
To take care of all of our children so that they can walk on the streets in safety.
כי היום בישראל קשה ללכת ברחוב.
Because today in Israel it is hard to walk in the streets, it's scary.
בדרום
In the south,
מרביצים ופוגעים לנשים כי הן יהודיות.
people strike and abuse women because they're Jewish.
לוקחים פרוטקשן.
Pay protection money to businesses.
פוגעים באנשים.
Hurt people.
בצפון יש פשיעה לאומנית, טרור חקלאי.
In the north we have other kinds of terror, including farm terror, taking of farmlands and bullying of farmers.
בירושלים יהודים מפחדים ללכת לכותל.
In Jerusalem there are places from which Jews are afraid to go to the Western Wall.
ובמרכז אנשים מרגישים לא בטוח.
And in the center people do not feel confident.
ואני רוצה להחזיר את השליטה לעם ישראל.
I want to return the control to the nation of Israel.
זו הארץ שלנו.
This is our land.
זה הבית שלנו.
This is our home.
מזמן שאברהם אבינו הסתובב והלך כאן בין השדות.
From the time that Abraham, our forefather, walked here in the fields.
אני גר בחברון.
I live in Hebron.
זו העיר שבה נקברו אברהם ויצחק ויעקב.
This is the city where the forefathers and mothers are buried, Abraham and Sarah, Isaac, Rebecca, Jacob, and Leah.
ואנחנו הולכים שם ומרגישים את ההיסטוריה של כל כך אלפי שנים שאנחנו גאים להיות חלק ממנה.
And when we walk there, we feel the history of thousands of years, and we're so proud to be there.
לאורך כל ההיסטוריה רדפו את עם ישראל.
Throughout all of history, Jewish people have been persecuted.
פרעה,
From Pharaoh
המן,
to Haman,
ועד ההיסטוריה הלא כל כך רחוקה כמו היטלר יימח שמו.
and to the history that is not so long ago to Hitler. May his name be erased.
ואנחנו נאבקנו כדי להמשיך לחיות.
And we have fought in order to continue to survive,
כדי להמשיך לבנות כאן מדינה יהודית, בית שלנו.
to continue to build here a Jewish state, our home,
וכדי להסתובב כאן בגאווה בארץ שלנו.
and to walk proudly in our land.
אני רוצה להגיד לכם דבר אחד, אלה שרוצים לפגוע בנו, הם רוצים לפגוע בכם.
I want to say one thing to you, which is those that want to hurt us, they also want to hurt you.
יכול להיות שהם רוצים להתחיל ולפגוע קודם כל בעם ישראל,
It might be that they want to start with us, the Jewish nation.
אבל השלב הבא זה אתם, חלילה,
But God forbid you are next afterwards.
וכל אחד בעולם שלא מסכים איתם.
And all those who don't agree with us, that's what they want to strike at.
אני מאלה שחושבים שאסור להיכנע להם.
I'm one of those people who believes that we should not surrender to them.
לא צריך להתקפל בפניהם.
We should not fold before them.
לצערי הרבה פעמים מפעילים עלינו לחץ.
Sadly, a lot of times pressure is put on us
שנתקפל, שניכנע,
so that we surrender, we fold,
שניסוג.
that we should retreat.
אבל מעבר לדוגמאות בהיסטוריה שכל פעם שנכנענו רק קיבלנו עוד יותר טרור.
But past the historical experiences, that every time that we surrender, we only get more terror.
מעבר לדוגמאות כמו בגוש קטיף, שגירשנו שם 10,000 יהודים מהבית וקיבלנו טילים בבאר שבע ובאשדוד.
There are many such examples, like the one of the 2005 disengagement where we left the Gaza Strip and we gave that land over, and then in the end we just got missiles onto Beer Sheva and Ashdod.
מעבר לאוסלו, הסכמי אוסלו, שבהם הבאנו את ערפאת לכאן, נתנו להם נשקים.
Including the horrific Oslo experience, which we brought Arafat to rule in this land. We gave them weapons.
ובנשק הזה נרצחו 2,000 יהודים.
And with these weapons that we handed them, 2,000 Jews were murdered.
הרי שגם...
So, I don't know if people are having trouble understanding this. Yishai is translating him. This is Jerusalem. Ben Gvir speaks Hebrew. He does not speak English that well. So he's speaking his Hebrew. There's an interpreter. So I think it's understandable. So I'm going to play a little bit more, a few more minutes of this, and maybe a question from my friend Dave at the International Christian Embassy. So just this has been Gvir at the Knesset last Wednesday for the Christian Media Summit.
גם ההיסטוריה ארוכת השנים מוכיחה
Our long history proves
שעם טרור לא מדברים בדרך כניעה.
that with terror, the way to talk with terror is not with surrender language.
שבטרור נלחמים.
You fight terror.
שבטרור מכריעים אותו.
You defeat terror.
וזה מה שאני רוצה לעשות.
And that's what I came to do.
חשוב לי להגיד
It's important for me to say.
שחלילה לא כל הערבים טרוריסטים.
It is important for me to say.
Okay, I'm going to advance this now to the question from the head of the International Christian Embassy. Let me see if I can find this here. Here it is. So here we go.
David Preston, please introduce yourself.
Yes. David Parsons. I'm with the
This is David
International
Parsons.
Christian Embassy here in Jerusalem. We thank you for coming in and addressing us today. These are Christians from all over the world, but there are some of us who live here. And we have a rule that we don't interfere with Israeli democracy. We will go out and defend Israel, support Israel, respect Israeli democracy, tell others to do that. And I think, but you know, you still get a little emotionally attached to everything here. And when Prime Minister Netanyahu, it looks like he's going to return to power now, there was a lot of fist bumping and toasting and all. But there's also genuine concerns about your party and you in particular, because you do have a history of a photo of Baruch Goldstein on your wall, of defending someone who burned a church in the Galilee, defending Jews who were charged with terrorism against Arabs. I'm a lawyer too. I know you got to provide legal services to everyone, but I also have friends and colleagues who saw you show up at a protest against the Kehalah congregation here in Jerusalem and join the incitement of those who were going to attend a Shabbat service, and it put everyone in fear, including the children. But we've consulted with our long-time Israeli friends like Josh and Nitzan and all, and everyone says you've changed. And so what can you say here to assure us that you're going to work within this government to work for democratic rights, minority rights? You've mentioned some of this, but especially for religious freedom.
אז בואו נעשה באמת סדר בדברים.
Let's make order of things.
משום שדיברת על תיקים שאני הצגתי כעורך דין.
You spoke of cases that I represented as a lawyer.
וכמו שאתה מבין, כעורך דין,
As a lawyer, you
מייצגים כל
understand.
מיני קייס וכל מיני תיקים.
As a lawyer, I have to represent all kinds of cases.
במיוחד שאני חושב שהבן אדם הוא חף מפשע ולא עשה את מה שטוענים שהוא עשה.
Especially since I thought that those people were innocent and not what was claimed against them.
אני לא מאמין בלשרוף כנסיות.
I don't believe in burning churches.
אני לא מאמין בלפגוע באנשים.
I don't believe in hurting people.
וזה אף פעם לא היה.
And these things did not take place from that person.
כן האמנתי בגיל צעיר, כשהייתי נער, שצריך לגרש מכאן את כל הערבים.
When I was a young man, I believed that we should kick out all the Arabs from this land.
חשבתי שכולם אותו דבר וצריך להוציא אותם מכאן.
And I thought that everybody was the same thing and we have to get them out of here.
אבל זה רק כשהייתי בן 17.
I was 17 then.
היום אני בן 46.
Today I'm 46 years old.
נולדו לי 6 ילדים.
I have 6 children.
למדתי משפטים.
I learned law.
פתחתי משרד עורכי דין.
I opened a successful law practice.
הפכתי להיות חבר כנסת.
I became a Knesset member.
ואני בטוח שגם אתה, דברים שחשבת בגיל 17-18, יש דברים שקצת השתנו. ככה זה טבעו של עולם ואדם.
I believe that things that you believed when you were 17 years old, you may not believe anymore, and that's the nature of this world to change.
Well, I'll let that go there. So that's Ben Gvir. He's one of the controversial people in the government. There's a guy named Schmotrick who heads up one of the parties, who's also controversial. I think he's said in the past that he wants to turn this Israel into a theocracy. There is a lot of tension in Israel with people opposing the ultra-Orthodox parties who don't really believe in the state of Israel per se, but they want to take advantage of the benefits. They want to get welfare payments. They want to stay home. They want to study Torah and make babies. And they don't want to serve in the armed forces. So there's a lot of tension there. So let me just go over here to the, let's see, share screen. Some of the recent stuff. So here's to the Friday Jerusalem Post that just came out. For example, you see here Netanyahu pledges. You see that's Jerusalem Post. It was difficult for Netanyahu to form this coalition. This is true. And he's pledged to advance West Bank annexation policies. So there's a significant number of people in Israel, probably 900,000, that live what you would call over the green line. So when the state was divided after the 1948 Declaration of Independence, there was a war. Jordan took over the Arab Palestinian areas, held those from 1948 to 1967 when Israel took back everything west of the Jordan River, including the complete Sinai Peninsula. That was given back to Egypt in the 1978 or 79 peace accords that Jimmy Carter worked out between Egypt, Anwar Sadat representing the leader of Egypt at the time before he was assassinated, and Menachem Begin. And understand it, from 1967 to 1940, or from 1948 to 1967, Israel didn't have any access to the old city of Jerusalem. That was controlled by Jordan. They pretty much devastated the Jewish quarter in the old city, and the Jews could not even really access the Western Wall, the Kotel. Very similar to what had happened down at Hebron, where Ben Gvir lives and where my friend Yishai Fleischer works as an official spokesman for that community. I don't have my pictures organized this today, but at the Tomb of the Patriarchs, there is a thing called the Seventh Step. And at the Seventh Step, where the Jews were restricted to praying for about 700 years. And that was a, let's see if I have and pull up a picture of this. Okay, so at the Tomb of the Patriarchs, this is Hebron's Seventh Step article from back in 2019, and they were restricted from praying there for like 700 years. 1257 to 1967. They were not permitted to go inside the structure there at the Tomb of the Patriarchs, and the 67 war changed that. Jordan was booted out. There's still, for example, the hotel we stayed at for the summit is near the Sheikh Bara neighborhood where they've had a lot of controversy over some homes. Very volatile situation at times. That was just a couple blocks away from where we were staying in what they would call East Jerusalem. And it's so strange when I was walking in East Jerusalem, I'm using Google Maps. And then I would pull up. So as you're walking from place to place, it says, you're crossing a country border. Do you want to cross a country border? Well, there's no border there. There's no checkpoints or anything. But the people, the woke people that do Google Maps and everything, they recognize they just won't accept that Israel controls that area. And it's also interesting when you're in East Jerusalem and you open up your AccuWeather app or something like this, and you try to find what the weather is in Israel, you just can't do it. It won't let you move over and check the weather in Israel, even though it's, from the 67 border standpoint, it's like right across the street. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So, there's a lot of people who are that live in the settlements, approaching 1 million. This is where we went to Shabbat dinner the other night, Efrat, Gush Etzion. In fact, if some of you remember, there was a gentleman named Ari Fold. He was a well-known social media guy from Israel, committed Zionist in the IDF reserve. 4 years ago, he was stabbed at a shopping center at the Gush Etzion Junction, right there along Highway 60. And that was, I don't know, a mile away from the home where we had Shabbat dinner last week. Maybe it was more than a mile, but it was close. Certainly just a couple-minute drive away. So this is what these people live with every day. So you can understand where Ben Gvir is coming from. So you're going to see a lot of controversy. This, for example, here, this is Lapid. So the narrative that they've built against people on the right in the United States and religious people is the same narrative that they're doing in Israel. This is my perspective. So I see this article, Likud, this is Lapid, the outgoing caretaker prime minister. Netanyahu is weak, the most extreme government in history. So you're going to see this narrative, and they're, former IDF generals, leaders are coming out against the government. It's a very volatile situation. So this is not going to be an easy thing. So that's tomorrow's paper. So let me give you an article. So this is an article that appeared at Jewish News Syndicate on December 18th. Alex Selsky, to win the War of Independence, we must govern the Temple Mount. I'll just read a couple paragraphs of this because it's very interesting, because the Temple Mount is a big deal. And as we're in Jerusalem, we're walking on the processional road that went from the Pool of Siloam that they've excavated down underneath Siloam in the city of David, underground. They've had to build this superstructure above it. But these are the flagstones that people would have walked on from the Pool of Siloam to the Temple Mount. Herodian, and I have no doubt in my mind that these were what existed at the time of Jesus. And it's interesting, is it not, that this is being uncovered, and the plan is to hopefully open this up as a pilgrimage walk for both Jews and Christians. Now, some people say it's going to take another 4 years. Some say it's 18 months. Some say it's 2 years. But it's just interesting that there's this convergence that we talk about all these things, that as they talk about building the temple, as they talk about the red heifers. I put up a little video on my Facebook page of the menorah that they've built for the new temple. These things all sort of are working together. So here's this article by Alex Selsky. The great significance of the Temple Mount, he says, is beyond religious and historical. It is national. The Temple Mount is a source of strength and power. It is also a symbol for the Palestinians and their supporters, who see themselves as its landlords if only through the Jordanian Waqf. It has become the symbolism of the Temple Mount that Palestinian rejectionists believe Israel is weak and temporary. The Palestinians are convinced that the Temple Mount is important to us as it is to them, and meanwhile, we continue to fight about it amongst ourselves, halakhically and politically, religiously. We do not understand the enormous damage caused by this debate, nor the central importance of going up to the Mount in order to strengthen our national identity and our connection to the land of Israel and Jerusalem. Until we do, we will not have achieved victory in our war of independence, which is unfortunately not yet over. And then he says this, and I saw this gentleman at the conference. I did not get a chance to talk to him. I went up to the Temple Mount for the first time a few days ago. I had the privilege of accompanying Professor Daniel Pipes, the president of the Middle East Forum. I saw him at breakfast every morning at the conference. I just didn't get over to talk to him. And one of the most influential historians and writers of the United States. Now, Pipes' view of the problem now is that this conflict keeps going on because Israel did not do a total defeat of their enemy in the 1948 war and even in 1967. And even in 1967, when they took back the Temple Mount, it was probably within a day or so that Moshe Dayan, the head of the Israeli Defense Force at the time, decided that it would be best to give it back to the Jordanian Waqf. And so here we are, 55 years later, and it's still an issue. Also understand, too, totally separate subject, they're having protests in Jordan right now against the king. So Jordan is about, I'm going to guess, 75% Palestinian Arab. King Abdullah II's wife is a Palestinian, but they're upset. There's things they're not allowed to do within Jordanian society because of their, quote, refugee status. So when you hear all these people saying, oh, Israel's oppressing the Palestinians and they don't give us equal rights and that type of thing, that happens in Jordan. That happens in Syria. That happens in Lebanon. So it's just a complete false narrative that they do. In fact, let me grab a book here. Luggage was a lot heavier when I came home than it was when I left. So here's a book. This is from a guy I followed for a long time. Actually, spent about 4 hours talking to his brother years ago. It is Teaching Terror to Tots. This is put out by Palestinian Media Watch. There might be a PDF version of this online. Itamar passed this out to it. They released this to us at the Media Summit. It had not been made public yet. Great book by palwatch.org. Organization headed up by Itamar Marcus, Teaching Terror to Tots. If you can get on the palwatch.org website, you might be able to get a copy of that. It's the kind of book we all love. It's a nice, thin book, has a lot of good information. And I think it might be available online, and it has links to click to the actual things that Palestinian Arab children are being taught about Israel, and it's shows the lies that they're being taught. So understand that this is all going on. So there's this concern about the Temple Mount. I also see some questions there, Suzanne. Thanks for posting your response. There's this guy in one of the ultra-Orthodox communities. He's claimed that he's done miracles. They call him the Eunucha. He's probably in his 30s, early 30s. And so there's a lot of people in the Bible prophecy community saying, oh, this must be the Antichrist. This guy is going to be the Antichrist, the Messiah. This is their long-awaited Messiah. Listen, I asked a lot of people in Israel about this guy. Nobody had heard of him. So he's in a very small sect. This is bigger news in the evangelical Bible prophecy community than it is than Israel. So I agree with the comment on the YouTube channel that I would not focus on this. I think it's somewhat of a distraction. So that's my response to that. And I have a few questions here. So I'm just going to try kind of jumping around here. I have one other article that I want to reference, and it's over here in this other browser. And it's an article by Martin Sherman called Into the Fray, Palestine Countervailing Hypotheses. And Martin Sherman is very conservative. Some people consider him controversial, but he is very much sort of similar to what the gentleman who wrote the article about the Temple Mount, what Daniel Pipe says, and that Israel just never really defeated the Palestinian Arabs. And now we have this problem. And now we have this, everybody's pushing like, we're going to have, how are we going to have peace? What kind of peace are we going to have? Bibi Netanyahu has come out with a couple of interviews. This is one at the Hoover Institution about 2 weeks ago. He also did a long interview. You can get the audio of it, NPR, National Public Radio. One of the things he talks about in there, and this is what was a big deal among almost everybody we talked to in Israel who came to make presentations at the media summit, the Abraham Accords. They want to move forward with the Abraham Accords. Netanyahu wants to move forward with the Abraham Accords. And one of the things Netanyahu has said is we are going to make, the one thing he wants to do right away is make peace with Saudi Arabia. And that's a big deal. Now, I don't think peace with Saudi Arabia is going to happen until the king dies. But the Saudis, at least the Saudi power structure that's there with the current king, have said, we're not going to do anything on peace. We're not going to make peace with Israel or do anything with Israel until they resolve the Palestinian issue. So there have been some proposals passed around. I've mentioned a number of times a thing called the Hashemite Kingdom of Palestine, which seems to have come out into the press back in July with soft approval from the Crown Prince. There was also a big article in the Wall Street Journal back in June about the Jordanian option where Jordan would take over these areas. Netanyahu has said there's not going to be any kind of peace with regard to those areas of Judea and Samaria, often called the West Bank. They're also called the West Bank by everybody else. I don't like that term. But unless Israel has complete security control over those areas, there's just no way that this is going to move forward. So there's been some back and forth with different people about these proposals, and I just don't know how far they're going to go. But so let me ask there's a couple other questions. So the first question was, what about a deal with MBS? How quickly? I really think you're going to see moving that direction, but I don't think it changes until King Solomon passes away. And he's in frail health. Let's see. Is Ukraine the beginnings of Gog Magog? I've thought about this a lot over the years. I mean, I know there's a tendency that, Russia sneezes and the Gog Magog war is imminent. I'm not sure that it's imminent. If Russia is part of this Gog Magog thing, it could be. I'm not thoroughly convinced that it is. But let's say it is. I just don't think Russia has indicated that they're going to be able to make a big move towards Israel in the time being because they're sort of bogged down in Ukraine. When the Ukraine, and I see all the apologists for Russia, and that's fine. You can have that opinion. And by the way, if I criticize Russia, it doesn't mean I'm pro-Ukraine. So be a little bit more nuanced in the way you look at this thing. But I heard all this, Russia's going to roll over these people in 2 weeks. It's going to all be over. And here we are almost a year later, and it's still going on, and Russia's moved back. And every time Russia moves back, all the Russian apologists get on and say, oh, look at this, look at the great strategy of Putin. Ultimately, I think the way it's going, Ukraine's going to be obliterated, and the United States could provoke a major international conflict with Russia, with the way that it's going. So I'm concerned about the way that it's going. But I think that a bigger issue is Turkey. Turkey seems to be rising quite a bit. Turkey is an energy hub now. They're pushing it. They're Netanyahu, or not Netanyahu, Erdogan, the president of Turkey, is up for re-election next year. And he's being very oppressive with journalists that oppose him. He's pushing into into Syria, into the Kurdish regions. Iran's pushing into the Kurdish regions. The Kurdish people, that's probably the largest ethnic group on the planet that doesn't have their own country. It's a real mess over there. And so as I talked at dinner last Thursday with Seth Frantzman from the Jerusalem Post and Jonathan Spire, who writes often for the Jerusalem Post on security issues, who wrote a pretty good book on Syria called After the Fall, and understands the region as well as anybody. They're talking about the Kurdish thing. Turkey's causing problems in the Kurdish regions. And so what they expect to happen is Russia will come in and broker a peace agreement, and then Russia will look good. And then Turkey's going to go in and help resolve something with Ukraine, and then Turkey will look good. And Turkey's trying to resolve things with Syria, and so they all look good. I mean, there's a lot of different pieces going together. It's very complicated. So, but I think, listen, Chuck Missler was a friend of mine. I was at a dinner with him. I was sitting there at a table. It was just Chuck and Bill Koenig and I. It's probably 14 years ago. And I asked Chuck, what are you excited? And Chuck said, listen, the one thing I'm looking at is Turkey. And when Turkey starts to get more involved in all of these things, then I'll get excited. So pretty sure if Chuck was still around, I went to be with the Lord a couple of years ago, that he would say that Turkey was important. So let me answer one other question that I saw, and then probably terminate this because I've gone on too long probably. I don't even know what time it is. I've probably gone an hour. Somebody asked about why was Jesus put 3 days, 3 nights in the tomb. So I'll give you my understanding based on the research when I was preaching a few months ago on Lazarus. I believe, I could be wrong on this, this is what my research showed, that the reason that Jesus didn't come to Lazarus for 3 days was because 3 days was when, you died, and 3 days later, you're dead. So after being dead for 3 days, then they could say, yeah, you're dead for sure. And so I think that's part of why Jesus was put in the tomb for 3 days. So there would be no question he was dead, then he rose. And it also fulfills the pattern of Jonah, of 3 days and 3 nights. So I think that's what it was. And somebody mentioned that Eric Stakelback, I didn't see him at the conference. He did interview Benjamin Netanyahu recently. So anyway, I think I'm going to terminate this. So a little quick update. So Sunday, FBC is not canceling church for the holiday. We might cancel church because of the weather. We don't know exactly what it's going to be like. It's going to be really cold here. I've seen people posting here that it's already, 22, 23 degrees centigrade below zero. That's cold. 35 below zero. It could be really cold in the Midwest, and we're supposed to get up to 6 inches of snow tomorrow into Saturday. And because it's so cold, the stuff they put on the roads aren't going to work that well. So we may not have church on Sunday, but if we don't have church, I'll come down here to my office and I'll do an update Also, there is a YouTube channel called The Goslings, Gosslings. They interviewed me when I was in Jerusalem a week ago, Sunday. Talked about a bunch of different issues. It's my understanding that that video is up. So I'll ask my esteemed moderators. Oh, I see the Goslings are there. Somebody's in the chat. So we did have a hour or so long conversation that we're going to continue into the future, but they put that video up. So we'll try to put that into the YouTube description. If somebody wants to email that to me, we can get that up. So anyway, God bless. Look, I'm going to say Merry Christmas. I know it's controversial. I think the birth of Jesus Christ is incredibly important. There are many prophecies about this. There are whole chapters in the book written about this. I think it's been commercialized and people have lost complete focus on this. But I think this event is important for us to remember from a prophetic standpoint and from a pattern standpoint, and understand they weren't ready the first time. We need to follow that pattern and not be ready the second time. So listen, focus on this. Stay in the Word. Stay warm. God bless, and I appreciate you all. Later.